Hello everybody, welcome to WeVote, and today we are talking about the EFF Manifesto and manifestos in general and how to review them. I've taken a lot of time. I was at the manifesto launch event. I've taken a lot of time to read the document, make sure I understand it, research, get more information so that I can give you accurate information and analysis about this manifesto. And it's primarily because, one, I take pride in being a debater, and debaters are facts first and making sure that we have the correct information. But more than that, ideas really do matter. And I think that they've fallen away. We're not having enough discussion about ideas in general. And I want this channel to be one of the places where you can come to for intelligent, informed conversation so that you can form your own opinions. And if you want to share your views and thoughts, feel free to take part in the comment section. I encourage it. I look forward to it. And I would love for you to be part of the discussion. So let's jump into the manifesto. Let's talk about this document. But let's start off by actually just defining what a manifesto actually is. A manifesto, most definitions would say, is a published declaration of your intentions, your opinions, or a vision. That's it. That's a manifesto. It can be artistic, it can be political, it can be scientific. So it's often used in reference to politics, but a manifesto can be more than that. I mean, there are several interesting manifestos. Let's check how many of those you know. Maybe you can answer in the comment section. The Communist Manifesto, one of the most popular manifestos. If you are looking at the standard for what a manifesto is, that's one of them. The 1890 Manifesto comes from the Jesus Christ Church of Latter-day Saints. I may have missaid that. But you know the Latter-day Saints, and they have a manifesto, this 1890 manifesto, and it's actually a manifesto about polygamy. Can you believe it? So maybe you should check that out. There's the 1950 Christian Manifesto, which was basically Christians who came together and made a political stand against the oppression of Christians in China. There is the Green Book. The Green Book is a popular one. Muammar Gaddafi is responsible for the Green Book. So that's a manifesto that you need to be aware of. There's also the Contract with America. This comes from Newt Gingrich's time when he was ascending as the speaker in the House. And I'm talking here about the US. And the Contract with America was one of the documents that the Republicans pushed, and it's still, right to this time, continues to be one of the documents that drives the ideological thinking of the Republican Party. The Hacker Manifesto is one that comes from the science community. Another manifesto is one called You Are Not a Gadget. You can look that one up as well. One of the most evil manifestos in terms of outcomes and impact was actually Mein Kampf, and that was out of Hitler's manifesto, which he wrote while he was in prison. So those are some examples of manifestos. Having said all of that, I want to give you my first impressions about the EFF Manifesto launch before I give you what I think is a fair criteria to measure the EFF's manifesto and all other manifestos when we are now doing the manifesto comparisons. So going to my first impressions, what were my first impressions of the EFF event? Made some notes, collected my thoughts, and here they are. 1. The launch was well organized. You cannot take that away from the EFF. Their bus logistics were effective. The event was well attended, well orchestrated from start to finish. They had the right mix of artists, the right kind of artists. The crowd was energetic. They had the confetti at the end. A lot of things were well thought out. It was a well thought out, organized, and executed event. The only thing that I would take away from the launch event was the lateness of starting, because it was supposed to start at 10. I think we only got going at about 12:30 or so. So it was 2.5 hours late. You definitely have to deduct some marks from that if you're scoring. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would like to say about it as a first impression is that it was highly impactful. It had lots of impact, and it achieved the intended outcome. So what do I mean by high impact? For example, we know that many people were watching it on SABC and ENCA. That's impact. It was on YouTube. It was live streaming, and to date, and I'm shooting this today, the 6th of February, to date, we know that the SABC YouTube had 86,000 views and the ENCA YouTube channel had 28,000 views of the manifesto launch. But on top of that, they also had those interviews that were follow-up interviews. Floyd Shivambu had one, Julius Malema had one, Julius had one on SABC with Reddy Klabi, and Floyd had one on ENCA. Those interviews, the one has 25,000, the one with Floyd, and the one with Reddy has 117,000 views on YouTube. These are big views for political discussions on YouTube, especially local political discussions. It was trending on Twitter. It's still being discussed on Twitter. And obviously I'm making videos. Other people have made videos. I even saw that liberal commentators like Big Daddy Liberty also made videos. All of that is high impact. All of that goes towards achieving the intention for publishing your political vision, intentions, and ideology. That's something that I think you have to give them credit for running a complete and holistic event. Also, the third thing I would like to say as the first impression is that the booklets were a nice touch. To actually have a tangible manifesto booklet is something I haven't seen any political party do at a launch event, something that gives you, a tangible space to interact with. And if you look at mine, I don't know if you can see it, but I've been making notes, I've been annotating it, I've been reading it ever since Saturday and making sure I had complete understanding of what the EFF wants to do. And we're going to talk about that very soon. Before I go and have the discussion about the actual contents of the manifesto and review them, I really thought about what's the best and most objective way to do this. And I thought the best and most objective ways to do this is two things. One, come up with the criteria. And two, to come up with 3 different lenses of looking at it. So let's go through the criteria. And I want to hear your feedback on whether you think this criteria is fair or not. Because the criteria must determine whether or not this manifesto stands or falls. Not just like my feelings or my emotion to the political party, etc. The criteria must determine. If you come up with the great criteria, that criteria is going to be what determines whether or not you have a great assessment or you don't have a great assessment. So there are 5 things that are put on this criteria. Number 1, clarity and relevance. Number 2, specificity. Number 3, pragmatics, the realistic and practicable implications of that particular manifesto. Number 4, creativity. And number 5, the actual team that is going to roll out the manifesto. But before I go into those 5, I think the standard has to be, when you measure a manifesto, the same standard that is used by angel investors when they're investing in a startup. Because you are going to be making an investment. You're going to be making an investment in time. You're going to be making an investment in energy. You're going to be making the ultimate investment, which is your vote, your final decision. What do I mean by time? You're going to be following this party. You're going to be following its leadership. It's going to matter whether or not their manifesto stands the test. So you got to look at it as an obvious. Obviously, people who are selling a business are going to give you the best version of whatever they're selling, but you have to almost look at it with those discerning eyes to kick the tires to see if they actually have a good product. So going into details around those 5 criteria. Number 1, clarity and relevance. We need clarity on your ideology, your plans. We need clarity on the assumptions that you've had, clarity on the diagnosis of the problem. And I want to start off by speaking a little bit about the assumptions. We need to know, what are you assuming the growth rate is going to be? What are you assuming the taxable income, revenue, and other streams of revenue are going to be? What are you assuming the global economy is going to be? Because all of those things will have an impact on your business plan, which is the manifesto. We need to have a clear view of what do you actually assess all of those things to be. We need to know that so that we can measure. It's like the NDP. The NDP is based on the presumption that the country will grow at 5% up until 2030. The country has been growing at 1%, 2%. And as a result, the NDP, which was supposed to be achieved in 2030, is only realistically going to be achievable in 2049. If you're making an assessment of those decisions, you need to know that. It's important to know. So that's one of the things. Number 2, the specifics. We need to know, what are your goals? What are you aiming to achieve? What are your targets? What are the measurable outcomes from those particular goals? Number 3, what are the strategies and the pathways that you are going to use to achieve those goals? So for example, if you had the aim of being healthy, you would still need to tell us that you are going to be healthy and what this means for you. And maybe for me, it means I'm going to be 75 kgs and physically fit enough to run a marathon. So now you know what I'm targeting specifically under this aim of being healthy. So you know my goal, you know my targets. And then you then ask me, what's your strategy? Then I tell you, I'm going to run as many days a week as I can, and then I'm going to go to gym 3 times a week. And that's how I'm going to achieve it, along with a viable nutritional plan. So now you can measure whether or not I'm likely to achieve the very things that I'm targeting in my manifesto. Maybe my manifesto is that, you know, human beings must live healthy. The third thing, which is the pragmatics, the realism, the practicability of your manifesto needs to be displayed. So for example, you know, you need to clarify for us, what action do you want to take? Do you have capacity for that action? Do you have authority for that action? Can you actually afford to carry out that particular action? Let me give you an example. Somebody could come and tell us, and maybe Mangosuthu Buthelezi actually at some point, because he actually tried to do this, that they want to invade Lesotho. Now, it is possible for us to invade Lesotho. Anything is possible. We could do it. It's possible to invade Lesotho, but it doesn't mean it's a good idea or that the other criteria are met. Do you have capacity? Do you have the military capacity to invade Lesotho? Do you have the weapons? Do you have trained personnel who can invade Lesotho? That would be level 2 of assessment of the pragmatics. Do you have authority? Is it legal for you to invade Lesotho? If it's not legal, you can do it, even if it's possible, right? It's possible to do some stuff theoretically. It doesn't mean that that stuff actually is permissible, allowable, or even a good idea. So we need to know that. Is it affordable? What's the cost of doing this particular thing? That question is an important question, and we shouldn't allow politicians to run away from that question. It needs to be asked. We need to critically examine whether or not their plans are affordable. That's important. Number 4, what I'm going to call creativity, but what I mean is academic creativity. Do we have unique thinking here? Do we have well-researched ideas that are being presented to us? Do we have unique application of those particular ideas? What is the, the theoretical independent thought that is coming out of this particular political establishment? And one of the reasons I think it matters is because we need to know whether they can come up with unique ideas in unique situations by assessing their level of academic thought within their own manifesto. But also, it's going to demonstrate to us their level of preparation, their level of research. Anybody can type out a wish list overnight, even if it's a 170-page wish list. We need to know. And then number 5, you need to know the team. Who are the people who are going to be responsible for the implementation of this? What unique advantage do they have? What is their background in this particular industry? And what have they done prior in the organizations that they've led? So for instance, for the EFF, we're going to need to really ask critical questions about the SABC, about the ANC Youth League, about that Lembede Trust that we keep reading up so much about. We are also going to have to look at how the EFF has been run as the EFF. What is the performance of the top 6? What has been the performance of the EFF since 2013? We need to know all of that in addition to our other assessments, because you need to know who are these people who say that they can establish this as a company if you are evaluating as a startup. And I think if you know those things, then you can make a fair, critical, and objective decision on whether or not to invest. So that's going to be the criteria that we are going to use to assess the EFF, but also to assess the other entities that are going to be part of this manifesto review. The DA is not ready. They're still in policy mess. Maybe we'll get their manifesto on the 20-something of February, as they said. Maybe we won't. But for now, this part 1, I think I've clarified what I think is a fair criteria. I don't know whether you think it's a fair criteria. Just in closing, I want to say something. I'm going to be looking at this at 3 levels as well. Remember, I said there's 2 ways. One is the criteria and one is the level of scrutiny. I'm going to be looking at it almost like if you think about the Sunday meals that you can have. You know, there's pap and cabbage, boiled cabbage, plain pap and boiled cabbage with salt. That is the most skeptical version of a thing that will be happening in the assessment, for us to say what's the worst case scenario of your plan. Then we look at it at a pop and chuck level, pop, chuck, and chakalaka. We can eat. That's the medium. We need to assess at that level as well, but then also give you the 7 colors Sunday meal version of your manifesto to assess your manifesto at your version of its best self. So we need to look at it as, what is the best version, what is the average version, and what is the worst version of that particular manifesto, because any of those 3 could actually happen in the real world, and you need to have a realistic assessment of all of those. So that's the end of part 1. Tune in to part 2, and we're going to be diving in deep into the manifesto.